So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting at 17:36 hours GMT, which coincides with the British local time now on Thursday, the 11th of November 2021. So we start with the piece in the Times on page 15. The Times, London, 15th of November 2021. Now here is the piece about a London Metropolitan Policewoman called Yvonne Fletcher. And this is an item about the civil claim in the High Court that has begun. The claim is made by John Murray, who is a former Metropolitan policeman himself and who was a colleague of Yvonne Fletcher. And he held Yvonne Fletcher as she died, the court has been told. That happened in the 1980s. And that was in 1984. Now, the reason I'm showing this is to highlight the truth about the behavior of successive regimes, UK government regimes that have betrayed Yvonne Fletcher. And the ordinary people are fed the lie that patriotic kind of roles played by the people like Yvonne Fletcher, who was doing her job, that the patriotic sacrifices made by people like Yvonne Fletcher are given due recognition and their legacies are honored and respected by the government. That's not the case, because in this particular description in the Times by David Brown of what was, according to him, was mainly the submission by John Murray in the High Court yesterday. It includes the fact that, according to the claim by John Murray, the man called Mabruk, called Mabruk, Saleh Ibrahim Mabruk, is being sued by John Murray. And Murray is suing Saleh Ibrahim Mabruk because, according to the claim by John Murray, Mabruk was the one who orchestrated and organized the shooting of a London police person. Now, that was in 1984. And John Murray has had, according to his statements to the court, 37 years of anger and agony and frustration and nightmare. Because as he held Yvonne Fletcher and she was dying, the injuries were too severe. He promised to her that he would find out who did this to her, who ordered or organized this to her. And according to this account by David Brown in the Times on page 15, Mabruk has been known as being involved in some way or another. And Mabruk has been actually, first of all, he was allowed to leave the UK after the murder of Yvonne Fletcher. And then he was allowed back in. And he stayed during that second time, stayed for more than a year, more than 2 years. And he even bought property somewhere in the country. And here is the reference to Murray's promise to Yvonne Fletcher. The retired officer, that is John Murray, from Chingford, East London, said he had promised Fletcher, as she was dying, that he would find those responsible. I can recall the events of that day by the minute. I think about it all the time, he said. Philippa Kaufman, QC, for Murray, told the court Mabruk had not fired the shot that killed Fletcher. However, she said there was overwhelming evidence that Mabruk was a leading participant in a plan to use extreme violence by gunfire in response to the protest. Now, the protest was, that particular protest which Yvonne Fletcher was guarding, was a protest, one of a series, a protest against the regime of Muammar Gaddafi at the time in Libya. And according to this statement, according to the claims on behalf of John Murray in the court, Gaddafi had actually made a policy to target people who were abroad and were protesting against his regime. And he was determined, according to the accounts here, to have them dealt with and to retaliate against them. So the policy was to shoot at the protest in 1984 where Yvonne Fletcher was guarding. So Philippa Kaufman, QC for Murray, told the court Mabruk had not fired the shot that killed Fletcher. However, she said there was overwhelming evidence that Mabruk was a leading participant in a plan to use extreme violence by gunfire in response to the protest. She said in March 1979, that was 5 years before Yvonne Fletcher was murdered, Gaddafi openly stated that Libyans abroad were considered unsupportive and fair game, and he would get them. The court in London yesterday was told that a Libyan engineering student who infiltrated pro-Gaddafi elements in Britain heard Mabruk say in 1984 that the dictator, that is Gaddafi, told him, that is Mabruk, to seize the embassy, the Libyan embassy in London, and use the facilities, the guns, all the weapons, the money, and the power of the embassy. And then it goes on to say, and teach the British a lesson. After Mabruk and other Gaddafi supporters took control of the embassy, he told a meeting at the embassy that they had to teach a lesson to anti-Gaddafi people, and indicated that they had a number of targets in the UK. and asked for volunteers to help carry out the violence, the court heard. The student, who has not been identified, said he was told on the eve of Fletcher's murder that there was going to be a shooting. A pro-Gaddafi protester in the square said Mabruk told them where to stand so that we wouldn't get shot, the court was told. Another witness claimed a video was taken inside the embassy during the shooting to be played back to Gaddafi. Kaufman said that Mabruk's behavior demonstrates that he was party to and supportive of the plan to use violence at the protest. Mabruk was expelled from Britain but was allowed to return after Gaddafi gave up Libya's weapons of mass destruction. Mabruk settled in Britain in 2009 when he bought a £385,000 house in Reading in Berkshire, but was asked to leave again in 2018 and became an academic at Tripoli University. Mabruk is not participating in the case, but told Mara's lawyers, "I wasn't present when PC Fletcher was killed, nor did I instruct anyone to kill her, nor did I encourage anyone to kill her." Now, earlier in the piece in the Times, it says in one paragraph, Mabruk, who denies wrongdoing, was arrested in 2015 for conspiracy to murder. 2 years later, the Metropolitan Police said it could identify those responsible, but charges could not be brought because evidence had been kept secret to protect national security. Now, there is the paragraph. Protecting national security was more important than doing justice by Yvonne Murray. That's the bottom line. And that is exactly why I am spending the time on this particular item today. Because during the day, and that is not covered in the printed papers, which probably will be covering, some of them will be covering a meeting that took place today at the Foreign Office, that is Thursday, the 11th of November 2021, where Richard Ratcliffe, the husband of Nazanin Ratcliffe, attended a meeting with the minister, and the minister did not say anything about the debt that the UK owes to Iran. A debt going back to 1970s, about selling arms, that is tanks. Iran paid for the arms, but the UK didn't deliver the arms. And that is the debt that has been acknowledged as a debt by a former foreign secretary, foreign minister, Jeremy Hunt, as seen on the social media today during the day. And there is a dispute now as to, and this is an admission really, because the Iranians, according to Nazanin's husband, who is on hunger strike now for 17 or 18 days, his wife has been kind of persecuted by the Iranian regime, mainly to put pressure on the UK government to pay the debt that the UK government has owed the Iranian government since 1979. And again, the fact that there was secrecy around the evidence concerning who murdered Yvonne Fletcher, the policewoman. Similarly, Nazanin Ghaffari Ratcliffe is being betrayed by the current UK government in a similarly negligent way, because she, according to this evidence, she has not committed any crime against Iran. She has not spied against Iran, and she has not done anything wrong against Iranian government, Iranian regime, or whatever. She went to visit her parents in 2016. And she is innocent. And she is being penalized, and she is being tortured and persecuted, let's say, because the UK government is openly refusing to pay the debt that it owes to the Iranian government, Iranian state. And Jeremy Hunt has said, according to the social media posts that I have seen today and other people have posted, that the amount that the Iranian government is demanding from the UK government, on the basis that if they pay the money, Nazanin Ghaffari would be released, that this amount is not a ransom, but a debt. And it's not coming from somebody who is not familiar with the internal communications between the UK government and the Iranian regime. It is the person who became the foreign secretary after Boris Johnson left that office. It's Jeremy Hunt who is saying it. So, why would the UK government minister refuse to give the undertaking to Nazanin's husband today, Wednesday, the 11th of November 2021, that the money would be paid, owed to Iran would be paid, and Nazanin would be freed? Remember that. Two women. Nazanin Ghaffari is a holder of an Iranian passport which she uses, or she has used so far in visiting Iran, and she is also a holder of a British passport. So Nazanin Ghaffari is a British woman or British citizen, as was Yvonne Fletcher. So where is any evidence that either of these women is being kind of respected and recognized and supported by the given UK government? 1984 was Margaret Thatcher's time. And when Thatcher left office, it was, for 7 years, it was John Major. And according to the statement to the court by John Murray, the ex-policeman, who was a colleague of, very crucial colleague of Yvonne Fletcher, whom he promised he would find out who were responsible for her being shot. So he has had 37 years since Yvonne Fletcher was murdered. And he's not somebody who is African or Asian. So he's a very kind of ordinary white person, just as Richard Ratcliffe is. And yet the UK government is ignoring them. Compare these two women and the role played by Meghan Markle, who is involved in litigation, and as part of the litigation, she has admitted to the court in London yesterday that she forgot a particular incident of allowing her agent or her staff to make a statement, for which forgetfulness she has apologized to the court. If somebody apologizes, it shows their kind of accepting their responsibility. If they don't apologize, then it shows that they're not accepting responsibility. So anyone who does apologize deserves to be given recognition for apologizing at least. So what is the response to Meghan Markle putting as an entry her apology to the court? Instead of praising her, or instead of letting her kind of remain unremarked on, uncommented on for the apology, the racists in Fleet Street are now attacking her. And they're saying that her apology amounts to her being evil, which is what the Murdoch Times has said. And they're now following this up with promotion for the sworn enemy of Meghan Markle, Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan has ignored the last 12 days or so of the sleaze row that has sunk Boris Johnson, and it is not going away because the sleaze and the corruption, the second job by MPs, has now shifted onto other people in Boris Johnson's cabal, including the whip who allowed Geoffrey Cox to do the illegal, corrupt work in the Caribbean, or for his clients in the Caribbean, British Virgin Islands. So today's newspaper gives a summary there. It says that the chief whip, who is Mark Spencer, he authorized Geoffrey Cox that it was okay if he went to Caribbean and didn't attend Parliament. And then there are other items in there. Former Attorney General Geoffrey Cox received permission to go, but may face separate investigation. And the next item is, Britain is not a corrupt country, Boris Johnson tells media at World's COP26 climate summit. Now that's odd, because everything else points to the fact that Britain is not only corrupt, but Johnson is sunk in corruption. Conservative MP and former Transport Secretary Chris Grayling spends 7 hours a week working for Hong Kong Ports Company on £100,000 salary, in addition to his House of Commons role. 1 in 8 members of Parliament still employs a family member. That is in the newspaper. And here are the details of the story. So Ian Dunt writes on page 8, our electoral system is to blame for MPs moonlighting. Now that is only partly true. That's not the reason. And then it says 1 in 8 MPs employs family member using taxpayers' money. Now, one of the most notorious one who employs His wife, his children, is of course the Conservative Ian. What's his name? There is a Conservative MP whose name is Ian. He's from a Welsh kind of seat, but he's not listed in this particular item. But he is probably one of the ones that actually is exceeding the permissibility of the fact that MPs are allowed to employ their own family members. The wife of Tory MP Sir Christopher Chope is the highest paid connected party in Parliament, according to Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority figures. The MP for Christchurch's wife, Christine, is employed as his full-time secretary, earning between 55,000 and 60,000 from the public coffers. And Chope said to the I newspaper, "I only employ 2 members of staff, both of whom provide outstanding value for money for national taxpayers and my constituents." And then there is a man called Bob Blackman, Tory MP for Harrow East, an executive secretary of the 1922 committee, employs his wife Nicola as his full-time office manager, earning between 45 and 50,000 pounds. Clive Betts, Labour, Sheffield South East, employs partner James Thomas as a senior parliamentary assistant, earning between 45 to 50,000 pounds. David Morris, Tory MP for Morecambe and Lonsdale, employs his wife Emma Morris as a senior parliamentary assistant, earning between 45 and 50,000. Helen Grant, Tory MP for Maidstone and the Weald, employs her husband Simon Grant as a senior parliamentary assistant. He earns between 45,000 and 50,000 pounds. Christine Hild, wife of Oliver Hild, Tory MP for North East Hertfordshire, earns between 45 and 50,000 pounds as office manager. And Mr. Hild said, Christine's pay reflects her experience. Now, this is that kind of 2-page spread. And leaving out the item about the LSE incident involving the Israeli kind of ambassador. And there is a piece by Rosina Alin Khan, who is the Labour MP for Tooting. And the piece by her is headlined, "Working on the NHS frontline isn't a job, it's a vocation." Now that's a kind of gloss that she's putting on it. But it is a job as far as she gets the money for doing it. And so what I am dealing with here is that these are the cases of corruption and sleaze, and yet neither the Sun nor Piers Morgan is exercised about it. So that's the sickness. I mean, private lie calls the scum, or the owner of the scum, dirty digger. And although they don't call the scum, the behavior of the scum is more than enough ground to call them scum. Now here is the piece on the front page of the New European, dated 11th November to 17th of November, and it's about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. That's the headline. So Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is being betrayed by Britain. So what I'm saying is that it's not just her, as I have read from the piece in the Times about Yvonne Fletcher. This exposes the corruption and the lying and the denial by the UK government of the responsibilities and duties owed to the people, like Yvonne Fletcher, who is a former Metropolitan Policewoman who was murdered while she was guarding the protest. And evidence was hidden. Evidence about her murder was hidden. So her murderer could not be prosecuted or brought to book. That's what the Times piece says. And this is, of course, a lengthy piece by a woman called, well, I don't know what the pronunciation would be, but it's Clarni Chongail, whatever the nationality of that person. What she's saying is, this is the piece, the summary of the piece. Clarni Chongaili. And this is the introduction to that piece. The plight of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is a chronic irritation for the UK government. This is not something that even the Times is saying, and it's not been said by any of the Fleet Street papers. The New European is run by ex-Fleet Street people, but it's not considered as part of Fleet Street because it's against the UK leaving the European Union, and it is continuing to campaign against Brexit. So successive foreign secretaries, and what I was saying about Yvonne Fletcher, the succession in various governments. So successive foreign secretaries have dreaded the call of her husband and his supporters, including call by the Amnesty International, asking for more than comfortable words in the efforts to release Ratcliffe's wife from the captivity imposed by Iran. The official messaging that Britain is doing all it can to secure her release is a lie. So I'm not the only one who calls them liars. It is available on objective evidence that the government is lying. The government knows very well that Iran's lawful claim to more than £400 million held by the UK since before the fall of the Shah, that is, since before the revolution of the 1970s, is the key to unlocking Nazanin. The UK government's refusal to do the honorable thing, while a British citizen and her family are tormented year after year, is a national disgrace, masquerading as a moral high ground that Iran is the baddie and Britain is the goodie. So starting on page 4, New European writer Clarni Chongaili spells out the grim reality of a woman betrayed by a hostile regime, her own government. So this is the piece on page 4. Let's see a sample of the contents. And the heading gives away the actual fact that Nazanin Zagari Ratcliffe, is being punished and penalized and persecuted because of the UK government debt owed to the Iran government or Iran state. So there is a whole timeline from 3rd of April 2016 up to August 23. Let's see if the timeline continues. October 28th. So this is a 4-page article about Nazanin Zaghari and the Ratcliffe and the debt that the UK government, UK state owes to the Iran state. And this is the piece that is worth reading. Iran has linked Nazanin's detention to a decades-old 400 million debt owed by Britain to Iran for tanks that were never delivered by the International Military Service, a now defunct arm of the Ministry of Defence of the UK. An international court has ruled that the money should be paid. The cash is in an escrow account, and yet the debt is still outstanding, with the UK arguing that sanctions against Iran made payments tricky. The sanction doesn't make payment tricky at all, because the sanction is not conditioned or conditional on the fact that the sanction can go ahead if the life of a British citizen is at risk, which is what is happening here. So this is the picture of Richard demonstrating hunger strike outside the UK Foreign Office as he is continuing. And the fact that Richard Ratcliffe, who by profession is an accountant, has been reduced to do these, shows the hypocrisy and the lying and the corruption and the criminality of the government of the Conservatives. Because Nazanin has been arrested, detained, held in custody, in captivity, very much into the Conservatives coming into power. So the April 2016 up to now, 11th of November 2021, this is very much during the UK being, quote, fronted by the Conservatives. And as we said before, not today, but during his time as the Foreign Secretary, Johnson appeared not long after Nazanin was arrested by the Iranians and tried and whatever. Johnson actually told a lie to a number of MPs that he was talking to, who were the committee, whatever committee it was. And he said that Nazanin was involved in teaching, which is similar to the claim, but not exactly the same as the Iranians' claim. But the Iranians were saying that she was doing propaganda against the Iranian regime, and she was teaching potential kind of opponents of the Iranian regime on how to do the propaganda and how to do the work against the Iranian regime. Now that's not true, as all the evidence now and all the evidence that Nazanin has said at the time and throughout the period showed that she was not anything to do with any of those things. And now it is clear that even an international court has ruled against the UK and has ordered the UK to pay the money. There is nothing in the sanctions, whatever the sanctions kind of details are, that says that if one country owes money to another country, then the debt which is legally owed should be withheld. It doesn't say that. And this is the kind of time, this is the kind of moment when anyone who actually believes in justice would have raised the question about the international court ruling against the UK government. Who would that be? A licensed law trader like Keir Starmer, wouldn't it? But Starmer is continuing to remain silent. Now, this is very serious and alarming and worrying. Because the Iranians, when they seized Nazanin in 2016, she was accused by the Iranians of plotting against the regime and sentenced the innocent person to 5 years in jail. And she served out her time and enduring interrogations, months of solitary confinement, hunger strikes, ill health, and intense stress. In March 2020, she was released from Tehran's notorious Evin prison because of the COVID pandemic and served her final year under house arrest at her parents' home, but she faces the prospect of a second prison term after losing an appeal in mid-October against a second set of charges, which she also denies. She is now waiting in her mother's house. Now this is, first of all, we don't belong to any faction anywhere. This program is not connected with any political group or party or force or organization whatsoever. This is international, objective, and we are not part of any faith group or no faith group, anything like that. Purely on the facts and purely on objective evidence. So we say objectively that the Iranian regime, whoever is making the decisions, is making a mistake about the ideology, the morality, the case against the racist, imperialist, anti-Muslim UK state government operations. Nazanin is the last person that the Iranians should be tormenting and torturing. Because the narrative, look at the narrative. The narrative is absolutely wrong for the Iranians, holding Nazanin hostage. If they released Nazanin, then that particular narrative would evaporate and give the Iranians a moral high ground that they have been kind of losing for themselves since they arrested and began to persecute Nazanin. If they released her now, then they would instantly hit the headlines. International headlines that will endure for far longer than anyone in their policy unit may have thought. They won't get the British to pay the money, but they will get more benefits than the 400 million. They should reverse the narrative and release Nazanin, make her safely join her child and her husband. And the Iranians should leave Nazanin and her family alone forever. The Iranians are making a very serious mistake by giving up the opportunity to have the moral high ground internationally. Why do the Iranians, anyone who advises them, whatever regime, whatever particular president or whatever particular grouping may be in charge of the power in the state of Iran, why do they think that being seen as a repressive regime is a good thing for them internationally? Who are they repressing? They're not repressing Boris Johnson. They're not repressing Liz Truss. They didn't repress Dominic Raab. They're persecuting this woman, persecuting this man, Richard Ratcliffe, and they're making unbearable pressure. They're making it on their child and their parent and Nazanin's parents in Iran and Richard's parents in the UK. This is completely wrong. This will never bring results, good results for the Iranians internationally on ethical ground, moral grounds. I've said this before. The Iranians should let Nazanin go, not because Nazanin causing any damage to the Iranians. The Iranians are causing damage to the cause. And Nazanin cannot be prosecuted for something she hasn't done. Now, this is taking this diagnostic comment on the Iranians to the point where I have said the Muslim leadership, so-called, in power in various states, whether they're Sunnis or Shias, let's forget that for a moment. The Muslim leadership is failing. The Muslim leadership, I'm not holding a position in a Muslim state, so I cannot be accused of not doing what I am saying the others are not doing. The Muslim leadership is completely failing to create internationally objective narrative in support of an Islamic morality. Persecuting somebody like Nazanin is the last thing that any regime calling itself Islamic in any shape or form should be doing. And the other thing is that in other countries calling themselves Islamic in some way, the position of women, the treatment of women and children, girls, is absolutely unacceptable, unjust, and anti-Islamic. And generally in the Muslim communities where there is no Muslim community that exists in countries where the regime, the state is not necessarily formally Islamic, the behavior of the Muslim leadership in the communities is unjust when it comes to the objectively defined rights of women and girls. And it goes right across the Muslim countries. Why should the Iranians compete with Boris Johnson and other criminals for the top post of being the most hated and most unjust? Where in the Quran and in the Hadiths generally does it say that justice is alien to Islam? Where does it say? Why don't the Iranians set an example? The Iranians have got a problem when dealing with the British or the Americans in terms of the objective aspects. For example, when in Tower Hamlets, there was this corrupt mayor post holder, the corrupt Lutfur Rahman. In September 2013, a so-called Iranian television channel was recording the proceedings of a bogus meeting held to promote the image of Lutfur Rahman in September 2013. And the Iranians have persistently given promotion to crooks like Lutfur Rahman. Lutfur Rahman is not a follower of the Islamic ideology, nor is he a follower of the objectively defined, internationally objectively defined morality or ethics. Quite apart from the fact that he is very limited and in terms of competence. And yet the Iranians broadcast Lutfur Rahman as a sample of Islamic leadership in Europe. What a disgrace. So the Iranians need to understand that. And they need to understand that Jeremy Corbyn absolutely was an idiot. And that boasting about George Galloway being given platforms on the Iranian television was absolutely disgraceful. Neither Galloway, nor Corbyn, nor Ken Lying Still Livingstone represents intellectually the objective, mature, evidence-based truth about this country. So we shall be talking more about this and other items in the next part. This is just under 1 hour, I think.